Good afternoon, everyone. Appreciate you coming today for this inaugural presentation for this academic year. I mean, this is our third year, I think, doing the TechTalk. And I know that Lisa always correct me because the way I say it is like TikTok. It's TechTalk. So appreciate you all coming. I know we have several online with us, Zoom too. So I'm very happy to introduce one of our own. Like, we'd love to keep going with that, Mark. I hope you take it in the same spirit of pride that we have in having someone like you. But Dr. Mark Stanislav is the Vice President of Security and Engineering and Governance, Risk and Compliance for Full Story. Dr. Stanislav has spoken internationally at over 100 events, including RSA. I don't know what the acronyms mean, but I think maybe you will.
That one's Rivas, Shamir, and Edelman, which is like the same as the cryptographic cipher fun fact.
Yeah. DFCON. Is that the conference?
DEFCON, yeah.
DEFCON. Source, Boston, Code Gate, Sector, and ThoughtCon, I think.
ThoughtCon, yeah, Chicago, yeah.
New outlets such as the Wall Street Journal, the Associated Press, CNET, Good Morning America, and Forbes have featured his security research and initiative. Mr. Stanislav is the author of the book Two-Factor Authentication. He holds a BS degree in networking and IT administration, and from Eastern Michigan University, none other than Eastern Michigan University. An MS degree in technology studies from Eastern Michigan University. Am I right?
You're right.
So focus on information assurance from Eastern Michigan. And while at EMU, Stanislav built the curriculum for two courses focused on Linux administration as taught, and he taught as an adjunct lecturer for 2 years. He holds CISSP, Security Plus, Linux Plus, and CCSK certifications. He finished his PhD in cybersecurity from Dakota State University. Please help me welcome.
Well, it's good to be back. I was trying to keep track. I think this is the 6th or 7th time in the last maybe 12 or 15 years I've had an opportunity to present at Eastern, whether it's with the student group or larger things like the tech talks we're now doing. So it is, as I painfully told some people on the internet this week, this fall, this semester, 20 years ago is when I started undergraduate at Eastern. So fall of 2003 is when I started undergrad here. So it's been 2 decades. I'm feeling 2 decades older, but it's kind of weird. It's surreal to be at campus still, right? Like you think, I'm gonna go to school and peace out and go get a job. And but yeah, 20 years on, I've been here a number of times to speak. I have a student scholarship specifically for the cybersecurity program here at Eastern. On the advisory board for the program. So it really is. I mean, it's truly an honor to still be involved with the university as much as I have been. As mentioned, taught here for about 2 years as well as an adjunct, which was a very long time ago as well. If you're taking the Linux 212, 412, I don't know if they're the same courses. Some of that still might be my curriculum. I have no idea, but there's definitely a long history with myself and Eastern. So this talk today. A little bit on the nose. This truly was a talk that was given originally in Halifax, which is in Nova Scotia. If you've never been, highly recommended. But one of the first things I learned speaking at a conference in Halifax, I mean, well over a decade ago now, is after you speak at the conference and you go to the bar after, you will hear a number of different like sea shanties and kind of generic drinking songs. One of which is Barrett's Privateers by this gentleman, Stan Rogers. And so the song, or I guess the introduction, I'm a broken man on a Halifax pier, is actually part of the song. And so this was both a talk kind of an ode to being in Halifax and having spoken there many times at many events, but also kind of relationships with people in Halifax, which, fun fact for Jeopardy, is Haligonian is what they go by. So as mentioned, two-time graduate at Eastern, have worked for a whole bunch of different companies in a whole bunch of different roles. I've done quite a bit of federal testimony for different parts of our federal government. If you know what the DMCA is, if you've done security research, you might have heard of the DMCA. I was part of a small group that actually has the still in place today security research exemption in the DMCA, which used to be used as a chilling effect to kind of muffle researchers from doing research under the threat of civil and criminal litigation. So that was a big deal a number of years ago. Year and a half on from finishing my PhD, I'm still trying to remember I don't have to go study again. And, I can put my daughter down to bed and not have to get up and start working 5 more hours for the night. So that's been awesome. And then lots of conferences all around the world, from Korea to Malaysia to Abu Dhabi and everywhere in between. So it's been a really it's been a fun career. I mean, as evidenced by drinking up there with people in Halifax. And donair, which if you've not had donair, it's basically kind of like lamb pita. It's good if you should have some. And so this presentation is one of those 20 years on from Eastern's, or starting at Eastern. There are a lot of things that have rubbed me the wrong way in cybersecurity. There are a lot of things that people have said and repeated and parroted and continue to talk about. And it's hard, once you have momentum behind an idea and people start copying and pasting or retweeting or sharing on LinkedIn, it can actually be really hard to slow down bad ideas. It can be very easy to get a bad idea to become a best practice. And so this talks a little bit about different topics. I mean, there's 1,000 we probably could have in here, but I selected a handful where there are certainly opportunities to slow down. And one of the things actually at Full Story we have is kind of a business operating value, which is called pause on principle. So it's good, especially in leadership roles such as what I do today, if I don't slow down and I don't kind of course correct or I don't reconsider what I've been doing, who will, right? I have teams that work for me, they're going to probably do what I just tell them to do. So I think one of the value propositions of giving a talk like this is kind of some amount of independent thinking. Don't just accept what I'm saying or what the book you got 15 years ago said. A lot's changing very rapidly in cybersecurity for the better in the most part. So I'm a big Hamilton fan. I've gone to see Hamilton in multiple cities around the United States. And so this is not a faint of heart talk. I have very strong opinions, but hopefully they've been well formed over a lot of years of experience. But yeah, this is not going to be 100% agreeable to everyone for sure. And we're gonna, if BoJack Horseman fans, any? A couple? Okay. But yeah, we're gonna see how much we can knock out and keep this at a timely manner today. But there's quite a bit. So most of the deck is basically this, right? There's some perception, some claims, some parroted vision that someone's told us that we should all agree to. And this is one that there are, the idea or the quote of software is eating the world. When you build, if any of you are building software right now, the amount of dependencies in your one code base for your one you run npm, and all of a sudden you have 8,000 transitive dependencies in your code base to make the background work. There's a lot of dependencies, there's a lot of vulnerabilities found all the time. And so one thing that you'll hear about, and I'll try to remember to call out some of the acronyms and initialisms. So SCA, software composition analysis, this is usually the technology you will get either commercially or open source that will take a given code base, pull out all of the software dependencies and libraries and stuff, and it'll try to map vulnerabilities to them. So one thing, and we'll kind of touch on what all this means in reachability analysis, but if you've ever looked at maybe 2022 as a good example, 25,000 CVEs. Now, if you're not familiar, a CVE is basically, it should be a unique identifier for a unique vulnerability in a piece of packaged software. That's kind of like the more formal idea of what a CVE stands for. And so you'll see CVEs published in 2022 alone, over 25,000 CVEs were published. However, as a person that has many, many CVEs, I can tell you a few truths that are not really commonly known truths. In order to get a CVE for a vulnerability, you don't have to prove there's a vulnerability. You can submit your request to it's a numbering authority, CNA, but they basically have the ability in a subset of numbers that they can assign out as they see fit. They do not have to test your vulnerability. They do not have to validate your experience. They will just be like, oh, there's a vulnerability, cool, CVE dash whatever. Well, that's one way to do it, but that might also explain why there's 25,000 of these a year, because no one's doing the diligence to actually prove that these are actually vulnerabilities. The other thing is your vulnerability in your dependency in your web application, and this gets back to the idea of reachability analysis. There is no necessary truth that a vulnerability in a library somewhere in your code base can ever be exploited. That's the idea of reachability analysis. If you have a function call in a library that is vulnerable to an attack, you have to be able to call the function with a payload that will exploit the vulnerability. If you do not call the function call, you cannot get exploited. So by simply saying this package has a vulnerability, we have not proven out that there's any need to actually patch that or update it or upgrade it. And then, of course, in the environment, the company you're inside of, there's all these other controls and other mitigations that might apply. Analysis, great company, SemGrep, they do stat code analysis, among other things. They had this from 2022, 1,100 open source projects and their vulnerabilities, 1,644 vulnerable packages, and once you look at the version alone, that's your number. If you look at the packages that have an ability to actually reach the vulnerability in code, you're already down to 34. So if your team spent days, weeks, months filing tickets in Jira, shipping requests and emails to patch software, going to stand-up meetings and change management acceptance board meetings, and saying, hey, gotta patch these things, there's security risks, there's criticals, there's all these highs, we're gonna get exploited, we're gonna get hacked. Well, the number on the left tells you the scary thing. The number on the right tells you the reality of your circumstances. And as security practitioners, risk management is what we should be doing. The number on the left is hype management. Like you are looking at this weird, scary, huge number of fear. The number on the right is the one you should actually care about. Another theme, another related theme really, is vulnerability management. If you work on Linux systems, if you work on Windows systems, if you work on IoT devices, it really doesn't matter. In organizations, especially large corporate organizations, I work for a few, you will see entire teams just dedicated to tracking, alerting, emailing, ticketing issues across companies. And there's a lot of focus on this, and there's a lot of time sunk into this problem. And if you hear things on the internet, you'll hear things like, oh, this vulnerability that was exploited at a major corporation had been patched like 2 years ago and no one updated it. That's why they got hacked. You got to patch it, everything, patch. They're not wrong, but that's a big hammer for like a very small tack nail in reality. And some of these, again, you're going to see lots of large slides. Some people like to read, some people like to ignore me, have some fun with the slides. There's emoji, it's been great. But the reality is, people filing all these hundreds of thousands of issues into ticketing systems and entire teams dedicated to this problem probably aren't actually solving almost any of the problems. Because the problem, it's like the problem of vulnerabilities in software and the need to have tracking that span, entire subteams, a lot of it doesn't really factor in any of the risk. It doesn't factor in the reachability analysis. It doesn't factor in the attacker. And so I've been working in IT for a very long time, aside from going to school here at Eastern. But I started my IT career when I was 15, let's call it. And some days I really have to remember that it's not 1999 because it feels like a lot of corporations are still operating in the same paradigms, 30 some years ago. There is a great couple lies in cybersecurity, one of which is vulnerability management is the thing we all should be doing. We should all be managing all our vulnerabilities. The reality is patch management is actually the thing we should all be focused on. We should be able to have patches released, test them, validate there aren't regressions, validate there aren't any sort of like impediments to business, and we should be able to update those things 100 times a day if we wanted to. But we focus so much on vulnerability management that we're actually like one hop away from the root cause. Because the root cause is most corporations, especially, but also it's like small startups, they do not have the ability to patch things without breaking things. They have not built resilient architectures. They have not built highly available architectures. They've not built fault-tolerant architectures. So yeah, patching a vulnerability is a good idea, but if we were able to just patch everything all the time, and there are trend lines in the market, distroless containers, for instance, or rugged ops is like a concept you might hear about. We've kind of gotten a little bit off the path of success, and security is seen as like the trackers of badness that are coming around to hit you over the head and say, you should patch this thing, don't you know this is vulnerable? But we almost don't need to even do that, because if you had engineering programs that were patching already, your vuln management team would go away. Your vuln management tracking would go away. Your SLAs would go away. But we've gotten so far off the wrong direction of this that we're tracking on a symptom, and we completely ignored the cause or the causation of that problem. Bug bounties. Anyone ever participated in a bug bounty, like submitted a bug? Okay. And so, I actually triaging a bug bounty submission to our company right now. That's a pretty cool bug, in fact. One thing that you will find almost exclusively is that bug bounty programs will not accept a submission about social engineering. So what is social engineering? Generally speaking, like, okay, I call you up on the phone and I say, hey, like I'm Mark from finance and I need you to update our ACH transaction for this payment. And if you go do that, that's social engineering. I've tricked you into some circumstance that you should not be doing. All your phishing attacks on email, all your phishing on phone, social engineering just is like an umbrella statement, right? Well, like if we think about the goal of a bug bounty program, it's to take the ability of like the world, or the crowd, if you talked about crowd, like the world, and say, hey, if you find an issue with our cybersecurity, we will pay you some amount of money. Like it's a very transactional relationship in bug bounty programs, but bug bounty programs almost exclusively exclude social engineering. Well, I don't know how often you're looking at the news, but a lot of the things happening around the world and breaches and compromises, literally just in the last week or two, they're all social engineering. And so, there's a bit of a like head in sand principle here, and you'll quickly, going back to this 2021 ISACA, one of the most common, a little bit on the nose because I was giving a talk at ISACA, so I was kind of playing to the audience. But certainly I don't think whether it's this survey or it's the Verizon data breach incident response report, like all these things will tell you social engineering is a very, very effective way to compromise a business. If you want to know why we don't have social engineering bug bounty programs, it's going to look some like argument 1, 2, or 3. Again, we're not going to burn that down. Feel free to take a look. But what I will say is, many of you, I'm sure, know what Rapid7 is. I'm sure a lot of you have had to use Metasploit at one point. Metasploit and Metasploit and also Rapid7 years ago, there was a spoofed fax order sent to the domain registrar for those domains. And the spoofed fax actually got those domains taken over and defaced. And so that's Rapid7, awesome security firm. Used to work for them myself. Metasploit, super well-known security project. And it took a spoofed fax order, but that's yesteryear, I guess, fax spoofing. Today we saw, did anyone see like the most recent really big news social engineering thing that just came out? Do you know who it was, like what the target was or who got compromised?
Yeah.
Yeah, so MGM and Caesars just got hit and like kind of massively shut down quite a bit. And per usual, it sounds like it's, you know, a couple of kids in Russia. And they're like, yeah, it took us 10 minutes. Like we called them up, we pretended to be this person, we got this access, and then we took over. And that shut down billions of dollars of transactions at, you know, some of the world's largest casinos. So yeah, it's kind of a thinker why we've excluded bug bounty. Of course, those are all reasons that you will hear if you talk to another me, but I think we're a little bit past due maybe to update that. Just as a like not being a hypocrite, when we do get a submission to my company for our bug bounty program, as long as the social engineering has like a clear technique, like if they just said, oh, I could call your company and take you over. All right, well, we're not gonna pay after that. But if you're like, hey, there's this interesting issue where if you do this with your Zendesk, and I do this, and I got your employee to click this thing, they can take over your support account. All right, cool. Like, let's talk about that. I'd like to learn more, and I would pay out for that as a concern. Speaking of data breaches and big things that happened in the last few years, SolarWinds, there's a massive breach, and a lot of the market, if you see supply chain security as like a market segment right now, or like look at a Gartner report and see supply chain security, most of it came out because of SolarWinds, is the TLDR, and you can certainly look up a lot of history there. But one thing that came out of SolarWinds are like this massive amount of people talking about, well, if we just like cryptographically signed everything, you couldn't hack it, you couldn't violate the integrity, you couldn't work around the security because crypto is math and math is great. And so there's a lot of focus on supply chain security via cryptography of artifacts and assets and code signing and all you know, DLL signing and all the rest. This is intentionally not to be read, but you can, this is all written, like I didn't make any of this up, this is all like not placeholder data. But what I want you to take away from this slide, if you don't want to read this slide, is cryptography is not magic. It is math, which is pretty cool, but it's not magic. And why cryptography works is based on trust. Trust when you go to your browser, like if you open Chrome right now, and you go to, you know, I don't know, Bank of America or whatever, your browser has many roots of trust for cryptographic signing authorities. And if one of those signing authorities has signed a certificate, and then another an intermediary signing authority signed another certificate, and then down to Bank of America's website, your browser has a root of trust backup, all the way back up to a primary certificate authority. There's trust. If your browser's certificate authority ledger gets compromised, or if Chrome gets compromised and they start shipping malicious certificate authorities, you're compromised. So these are the kinds of things where we can't say, oh, problem solved, just cryptography, or cryptographically sign it. So you will learn from a cryptographic signature what key was used. That is a math, like provable math. We can tell you, oh, you have a signature. I can validate with whether it's asymmetric or symmetric, it's a little bit different of an explanation, but we can validate that the math checks out with reasonable assurances that it's all like the original key. But that's it. That's the only thing that this will solve for you. The math will check out, and that's the only thing we got. Because all the rest of this slide are all the things that go wrong with cryptography. All the reasons why we get bypasses and you know, developer bugs and insecure storage of signing keys and all the rest. So it's a simple solution, but it's not an easy problem set. I think this is a good way to think about it. So there are ways, and this is like a very in the weeds example, but there are ways, for instance, that you can have does anyone have a YubiKey? Or yeah, so YubiKeys are really super cool. Actually, Yubico just went public overseas last week. But YubiKeys are really cool. They're little pieces of hardware that can do certain cryptographic operations, and then you can offload it into your USB port, and you can add some assurances of like key protection, for instance, of cryptographic keys, which is awesome. But there's a lot of workflows where you will hear companies say, oh, well, we use YubiKey, we can't get hacked. or we use YubiKeys, you can't forge a signature, or we use YubiKeys and you can't get my cryptographic private key back. Some of those statements are true, some of them are very false, but the reality is, if you look at this flow, if an attacker compromises your laptop, your YubiKey might be safe, but remember the YubiKey in there with like maybe a private key for a signing, like a signing certificate. The question becomes, well, how do you use that thing? And the how you use it is you tap it and then it signs the thing that it's being prompted to sign. So if you can trick the end user, like the person holding the laptop, to press the flashing thing, you've now signed something they wanted to sign. So we're back to social engineering, we're back to manipulation of targets, we're back to layers of the chain of security, and it's once again not a very simple problem, even if it sounds easy. I'm gonna skip this. Basically, TLDR, there's some better enforcement things in GitHub if you want to take a look, but that's a very thing for a small group of people. Couple other things. There's some news reports in here, or some takeaways from different things that have happened. A good call out, Mark Curfew, who started. If anyone know OWASP organization? So Mark Curfew is like one of the founders of OWASP. He's been around and started many security startups and made a lot of money from them, which is good for him because he's very smart. But there's a traditional garbage in, garbage out. The same thing applies, in his opinion. Digitally signed garbage in, digitally signed garbage out. Like you cannot fix things with cryptography if your entire chain is not completely secure to some degree. For almost 11 years, hackers could easily bypass third-party macOS signed signature checks. So for 11 years, if you knew how to abuse a vulnerability, for 11 years, you could bypass those checks. And so you're like, oh, well, we signed software, we have people can't open malicious software because it's not signed by Microsoft, whatever. Well, for 11 years, you could, and no one knew. And so again, you can trust cryptography, you can trust math, but we also have to trust every developer, we have to trust every compute environment, we have to trust every operating system. This is where the problems of real computing security come into play. Anyone hear the phrase zero trust? It's everything. There's a zero trust article for every occasion at this point. So zero trust or zero trust architecture, zero trust networking, very, very hype, like way over hype kind of phrase. Google really started it after they got TLDR, Operation Aurora, Chinese hacked Google. Google has a lot of rude awakenings about their security model. They start to implement ideas. They publish a paper called the Beyond Report paper, and off to the races goes an entire security industry. So what is zero trust? A lot of it has to do with increasing the placement and position of security checks such that you do not trust any single security check. So if you don't trust the laptop, that's a problem, but maybe you introspect network traffic and you have authentication and authorization. You don't trust the network traffic, cool. Do you trust the endpoint? You don't trust the endpoint, do you trust the human behind the endpoint? And so we kind of layer up defenses at different stages of the compute and interaction lifecycle. And that's kind of the, really poor version of what ZT or zero trust is supposed to be. The title is sort of the crux of this particular slide, which is a lot of zero trust, especially on the compute side, right? So your laptop. Many of you, to some degree or another, corporate or maybe school even, you might have an agent running, and that agent might be running on your computer, and it's going to send messages back to some central service and say, hey, Mark's laptop is patched. Mark's laptop has a firewall enabled. Mark's laptop doesn't have malware running, whatever, right? Well, what is telling the central server that you're patched? What's telling your central server that you don't have malware? It's the computer that is checking for malware. It's the computer that is checking, you are in this kind of intractable loop for the most part, where the thing saying I'm secure is also the thing that might be insecure. And so can you really trust them? Not really. There are some layers to this onion, but overall, if you don't trust the endpoint to be secure, how do you assure that the message you're sending that says it's secure is authentic? That's a very hard problem to solve without some interesting concerns. Safety net. If anyone has an Android phone, For instance, safety net's been around for a very long time. One of the ways, if you ever root your Android phone, you might run MagGeast, and then MagGeast will basically turn off safety net. How does it turn it off? So safety net is basically doing hardware attestation, like very cool in-chip TPM cryptography stuff to say, yep, this device has not been modified. Who tells Google that your device has not been modified? The device that might have been modified. So we get back to this problem where safety net will cache a result in perpetuity about that device's health. So if I buy a new device, I log in, set up my Google account, and it says, hey, Google, my device has not been tampered with. Google's like, okay, on May 1st, 2022, device secure, sounds great. And then I install MagGeast, basically like shoehorn into the security model of Android. And from then on, I never update safety net again. And I've rooted the device, I've had malware on it, I've done all these crazy things to it. It doesn't matter because Google's like, yeah, last check-in, everything's great, like keep going. And so yeah, all these like really novel, cool, interesting security things that we think we've solved. It's only solved as far as you want to like do some fictitious thinking. Like things are better than they were, 100%. Is this better than nothing? Absolutely. Has this stopped attacks? Yes. Will it stop more attacks? But it's not a panacea. It's not solving all attacks. It's not solving all risks. It's not preventing all breaches. So the idea of zero trust is like you don't trust, you would just verify. You verify the phone, you verify the endpoint, you verify the human, all these things, right? There's a whole bunch of things on this slide that some might be hard, some might be like, I don't know what that is, that's okay. But one thing that I think a lot of people get wrong, I guess, can I use this super good thing? Yeah, look at that. So this line right here, posture management. You'll hear the phrase posture management, and basically what that's just intending to say is, oh, this device is patched. This device has a firewall. This device has an encrypted hard drive. It's the posture of the device. It's not saying that it's unhackable. It's not saying that it's not been hacked. It's just giving you a status report of like what it thinks it is. For almost every single person on Earth, minus the attacker, this is great because you want to know, is your employee secure? You're not looking at it as a bad actor. You're looking at it as a capability to identify badness against your good user, your good actor. So these technologies have a lot of value, but we cannot over-index on the risk that it's reducing because we are not considering the entirety of the threat model for these kinds of technologies. If anyone want to be a pen tester, I mean, pen testing is always kind of cool, but I mean, pen tester, okay, cool, pen testing. Here's the thing you want to know about if you're going to go to pen testing immediately. You might think you're going to get a customer and they're going to be like, hey, hack our website. They will probably tell you that to some degree, but what they're going to do is, in most cases, make it as hard as humanly possible to do that job. And what I mean by that is, like, if you want to be able to hack something as quickly as possible, and I talk about this maybe in more depth that I'll skip over for a sec, is there are ways to enable penetration testers to have the easiest possible way of learning where your vulnerabilities are, helping you be more secure. And almost always, we never do that. We actually go the most obtuse way possible to not solve that problem. And one of those ways is you will see a lot of companies refuse to give source code to the security firm they're hiring to find vulnerabilities in source code, which sounds like a terrible idea, and it is. But that's, oh no, this did not translate at all. What's going to happen here? All right, well, I mean, there's probably honestly like a stupid meme or something. I have no idea, but just assume like funny meme off Instagram stars a day. And so the idea of, and you'll hear it phrased different ways, but black box penetration testing is the most common thing you'll hear, which is, here's the thing, hack it. And you're like, all right, well, that seems super inefficient. Like, can I have docs? Can I talk to the engineer that built it? Can I get the source code? Can I get a dev environment? And a lot of companies will be like, well, no, you need to hack it like a real hacker would hack it. But that's not the goal of pen testing. The goal of pen testing is to identify vulnerabilities in your architecture, your network stack, and whatever, as efficiently as possible so that you can go fix it. Like that's the goal of pen testing. But we've gotten to a point where there's a lot of like this like cool hacker clandestine, like black mask nonsense. And it's like, well, you're the hacker, you should be able to hack into it. That's a great way to waste a lot of money for your company's security. Like that's a very, very effective way to get no value. And so if you are working with, so maybe you're hiring a consultancy, back to Dothan, you're hiring a consultancy or you're going to work for a consultancy. One thing you might want to ask in either direction is like, what is this business's thesis on approaches to penetration testing? You'll hear white box, gray box, black box. You'll hear code assisted. You'll hear different phrases that you'll learn more about eventually. But I would highly recommend if you're interviewing for a consultancy that does not make a pointed effort to get source code and docs and all the things, it probably speaks to their maturity as a consultancy. And if you go to work for a company that refuses to do that with their security firms, that probably speaks to the maturity of the corporation. There's no reason to make it harder than it's supposed to be. Attackers, for the most part, have, globally, unlimited time, unlimited resources, and nothing but like interest in breaking into your company. Your security staff probably has like 4 people. So don't make it harder when you hire someone for $80,000 to let them do their job to help protect your company. There are plenty of people that are trying to hack it right now, and they don't need source code because they have no constraints. And they have social engineering too, as we talked about earlier. Shifting left, another really cool industry phrase. Generally speaking, shifting left today means I have a security tool like static code analysis or something, and I'm gonna put it into like the CI/CD pipeline, or I'm gonna put it into the developers like IDE or something, right? Like it's about moving security earlier into the development lifecycle. Sounds great. Who can hate that? I can't. And so what we're looking at here is Microsoft, they have their secure development lifecycle. This is a very super common thing you'll see. And the early days of security was like, we will secure stuff when stuff gets hacked. Like we'll figure it out as we go, like we'll get it better. A lot of vendors and shift left people are like right here, like more tools, more testing, more this and that. And for me, the teams I run, the engineering teams I support, I'm focused on education. I'm focused on making every engineer have a pretty discernible amount of security knowledge, because your security team will never scale one-to-one to your engineering team. It won't even, if you look at data, I think I have this slide, BSIM is a report that comes out. BSIM, the kind of average across a lot of organizations that they have very accurate data for, 100 software engineers for one security engineer for like software AppSec kind of roles. You are not scaling up your security team to meet the needs of your engineers. You have to enable engineers to get better at security. That is the only way this is approachable as a problem. And so training is a huge focus, requirements design, so whiteboarding sessions, threat modeling, design reviews, spec reviews, chat on a Google Hangout with someone about what they're about to go build. There's a lot of ways to very quickly level people up, because again, if I teach you something, hopefully some amount of that's happening right now, that'd be awesome. If I teach you something, you now have that knowledge. You don't have to hit me up next time. You don't have to email me or hit me up on LinkedIn. Like, you have the knowledge. Congratulations. But if I hold knowledge, if I hold all the information, you have to come to me every time. And that's very inefficient to be successful in everything in life, to be clear, but security for sure, because that's all I'm here to talk about. This terrible image I stole off the internet and then made that little sidebar is, I think, still representative, hilariously later in a way that I really appreciate, for myself anyways, which is, we see the top, like chevrons as just like, okay, A then B then C then D, but really you need to look at it as an investment, kind of like, the investments are not equal. While the order might be the correct order, the amount that you put into each stage should be lessened over time, because response means we got hacked and we got to go fix it. You want that to be a good process, but you want to spend very little time there. And a lot of our industry spent a lot of time there. All we did was firefight. All we did was like get back from breaches. So investment, training, and education, the peanut butter is basically to say like, this is not spread across evenly. This is not uniform. You need to overinvest in people and training and education and insight. You need to ideally not underinvest in response, but if you do the right things in that order at that level of concentration, the need for response should drop down. A whole bunch of words on this slide as well. TLDR here is every single part of security is easy and affordable in someone's brain. it's when people start writing code that the problems become a problem. And the more you can do to intercept a person's idea that might have a fundamental security flaw in it, that costs you, maybe coffee. If you ship that code and you have a data breach, that costs you a whole bunch more than coffee. And it's being able to intersect with people as humans at the right time, at the right phase, that enables businesses to succeed. It's when you start to jam in a bunch of technologies and tools that are just blowing up all these like completely incorrect results and saying they have vulnerabilities where they don't have vulnerabilities. You lose trust, you lose interest, you lose partnership, you lose collaboration. And once you lose those things, you probably should just go to get another job because it's really hard to go backwards. It's a very, very hard problem once you've lost thousands of engineers' attention, and there's like 5 of you in a security team to ever be like, hey, talk to us. Like, you're a little bit late for that. So try to overinvest and don't shift by throwing more alerts and more noise at people. Really focus on a couple like fundamental, like first principle security, and you'll actually get a lot more than all the cool tools and the pipelines that you could ever jam. I hate that rolled over. Okay, I gotta figure that out. And so, like, if you apply for a job right now, you assuredly have this in your LinkedIn job post and trying to get you hyped to take that job. 100%, that's somewhere in the job post. Like, you are in part of a world-class security team. Like, it probably is not world-class. It probably is like fine. Like, it's good. And maybe even on a really nice Saturday afternoon. But this idea that there's some competitive threshold in the market of the world for security, and everyone has a competitive security team is not logical. Like that's a fallacy if you can think it through. Not everyone can have a world-class security team all at the same time. But all the things I talked about earlier, don't get too fired up about the latest like blog post you read on like Reddit NetSec. Don't spend too much time copying and pasting stuff from like old people like me for like the last like 20 years. Bring a little bit of thoughtfulness to what problem did we try to solve today, and realistically, how much did we solve? So again, one of the things I mentioned at the start of this talk is risk management is a thing that I think gets lost in like it gets lost in translation, especially in like, hey, I'm due SQL injections. Okay, cool. What's the risk of a SQL injection? Well, it could be data dumps, like we see that a lot, but it can also be code execution. It can also be a pivot foothold into a network. It can also allow for a social engineering attack. It's not like this very simple concept. The attack is simple, the abuse case is simple, but the consequence is what risk management gets to. So if you're at a 5-person startup, your security program should not look like Microsoft. And Microsoft should also not be making a 5-person startup level security program. And there's a lot to be said for understanding your customer. A lot of the teams I run, if you want to not work for me very long, you will treat people not as a customer. Like if you, oh, well, we're security, we'll tell them what to go do, and they have to go do it because we're security. Probably not working for me a tremendously long amount of time. And that's not like a deep philosophical thing. It's a how to win strategy. I want to do my job well, and I cannot do my job well if people are against me every single day I come into the office or log into my computer at home comfortably. So when you're thinking about like world class and like who you're going to work with and who you're going to work for, I would encourage you to think about opportunities as some amount of growth oriented, right? Like, oh, I'm going to learn some cool stuff, a new technique, a new tool, a new this or that, but ultimately, your security organization should be adapting to the business and not the other way around. Historically, however, we've done a lot of like ivory tower syndrome. Hey, we're security. We'll tell you how to be secure. Just do everything we say to do and you'll be secure. And it's not worked. It's actually worked very poorly. And so I would encourage you to start with the mindset that if you're going to be a pen tester, if there is no network engineer and there's no software engineer, you do not have a job because there's nothing to check. Which means you're in customer service. You exist purely to satisfy the needs of other employees. That is how you know you are in customer service. I used to work at the help desk here at Eastern Michigan University. Yeah, if no one had computers on campus, I would not work for the help desk. There would be no help desk. Why would you have a help desk? So it's it's a little bit of maybe a seemingly idealistic point to end a talk like this on, but it's one that will make you successful, so take it away. There are some things that are not just me complaining for an hour with all of you. There is a lot to be said. Number one is a point I'll hit really quickly. Every team I run, every program I build, I use a maturity model. There are multiple maturity models on the internet. They are provided from an amalgam of like federal government, from private industry, from consortiums. It's very easy to call your shot and focus and double down and triple down on one idea. Like, we're going to be the best at static code analysis. Great, I'm tracking 293 individual parts of my AppSec program. Who do you think on a longer timeline will do a better job of building an AppSec program? If you only focus and go heads down on like your domain of expertise, you will assuredly be very good at that, and you will have probably over-invested into it to diminishing returns. So maturity models give you a framework to understand, oh, hey, we're like lighter here, we're doing better over here. Totally forgot this was even the thing we were supposed to be doing all last year. So you'll have a little bit of perspective, and perspective is usually hard to come by. So I would encourage you, if you're newer to building a cybersecurity program and you go to a new company, try to think about it from a lens of not what do you know, but what don't you know. And a maturity model will help you unlock what you don't know and maybe give you some insight you need desperately. Funniest one of my whole career, I started consulting at 7, and I was doing major corporations like Yahoo and Looker before Google acquired them, and Plantronics before Poly merger, and critical infrastructure and water treatment. And I have all these customers all around the United States. And I started with like a very cool cool is relative, obviously. Very cool security mindset, like hacking's cool, security, blah, blah, blah. And by the time I left that job, I was like, you know what? No one should do anything tomorrow if they don't have data classification in place. Because in order to make good risk-based decisions, you have to know what you're protecting. And to know what you're protecting, you have to be able to qualify how you talk about risk and like asset protection levels. So if you're building a new network, what segment of the network has to have the highest security assurance? What system in that rack cabinet at that data center is part of your PCI cargo data environment? Because if you don't know that answer, you can't pass your PCI assessment, because that literally is like the predominant focus is like, where's the cargo data? So a lot of my job very quickly told me I was wrong, and that I need to understand the context before I start coming up with like really cool technical ideas. Technical ideas are very easy to come by. Good technical ideas that are married up thoughtfully with the needs of a business to not diminish revenue, to increase revenue in some cases, to meet compliance needs without eroding value of a security program. That's the creativity of this job. Like, there's a lot of creativity that goes along with security. Almost none of it has to do with computers. It's a business job at the end of the day. I know the deck, Lisa's got the deck. The one that you probably want, if you want to look for all this stuff, is speakerdeck.com/Stanislav. There's a bunch of links I've linked in this deck, but they all go to the same place. This slide deck, also for the brave people I saw trying to take pictures on their phone, this slide deck is on the internet at that website. I thought I should have started with that, sorry. But there's it's mentioned 140 presentations across the last, 15 years. There's a lot of stuff I've written down, and I've tried to curate it in one place. So if you're interested on Linux security, if you're interested in IoT security, if you're interested on web application security, I have a talk. I'm not saying it's relevant still, I'm not saying it's good. I'm just saying it does exist and you can look at it if you search it. So here's our buddy Stan Rogers. My personal website is uncompiled.com. I also think I got that about 2003, maybe a little earlier. My Gmail account's the best way to hit me up if you want to say hi. Also on LinkedIn, feel free to add me on LinkedIn. If LinkedIn seems like a thing that you're going to stay far away from, don't. LinkedIn is like one of the best networking vehicles. I absolutely use it to hire people, recruit people, find people all the time. So if you've been holding out for LinkedIn, get rid of something else, add LinkedIn as a social network. You will get a lot more value from it than almost anything else. Yeah, I mean, with that, we've got definitely a few minutes. What questions can I answer that I haven't yelled about for the last 45 minutes? So let's give you please.
So you said you worked help desk. How did you move away from help desk?
Yeah, great question. So the question for some internet people probably is, how did I kind of migrate my career from, starting in help desk to being here, doing this thing for, you all? I think the biggest thing is help desk was a career opportunity that gave me money to go hang out. But on the side, weekends, nights, I was studying, I was going to security conferences, I was writing code. That website compiled used to be a Unix security website I used to run. So I like side hustles, like I was developing myself, like my day job was a way to pay bills. It was fun, I met good friends. Some of those people are still part of EMU today on the advisory council with me. It's a bad answer, but it's just like, there's gotta be something you're passionate about that you spend time on because you want to. And there's gotta be something that you probably do because you have to. And I chose a lot of my free time at EMU, specifically at Best Hall and at Hoyt and some other places. Like, I spent a lot of time doing computer stuff that was not requested by my class, by the help desk. Like, you just have to kind of find other opportunities and make some luck, I think is like a good way to put it. But I did have an opportunity through the help desk, for instance, actually here it's, I think it was at still, maybe it was at Roosevelt. There was a person, Shane Davis, I don't know if anyone knows. I'm looking at like faculty basically. Shane was here and he ran a lot of the college technology computing, and I became friends with him. And I said, hey, like, do you have maybe any opportunities? And I actually worked, I think, 2 semesters doing like network setup, Unix setup, stuff like that. So I think going back to the LinkedIn point, network, find relationships, build connections, and then ask. I think the one, really, truly, whether it's negotiation for your salary or it's promotion, a lot of things are just not obvious to people as much as you are thinking about it in your own head. So if you're like, wow, I should really get promoted, I did these like 18 things and I'm really good at this job and no one gives me more money, like, have you asked? Because the person that's your boss or, Shane here at COT, he wasn't like, man, I really hope Mark works. Like, I had to go to him and say, I would like to work for you. Is that a thing that you have an opportunity for me? And that's hard. It's like cognitively hard, it's like emotionally hard to do stuff like that. But like asking for things is like a cheat code for a lot of life, I think, but for work especially. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. Any other questions? If we're out of people, sure.
So you've spoken about how training your engineers to come to think like security practice coding securely. What would you say is the opposite of that for security to think like engineers? How would you practice that?
Oh yeah, I don't know if I had it, probably because it was all yelling, but like a lot of my other slide decks, you'll see a lot of calls about it. So I'm not gonna go back because that's a lot of work, but like I've been a software engineer, I've been a systems administrator, I've worked in help desks. And so when I talk to people in those roles, I'm talking to them as a peer first, and as a security professional second. I will say, and kind of pro con based on my current audience, if going back to the question about the help desk, I don't look at the help desk even in hindsight as something that was like off of my career trajectory, if that makes sense. I like customer service, humaning, dealing with people that are upset. These are all very good. One of the best hires, maybe he's listening. Hi, Ben. He probably isn't listening. One of my best hires ever, Ben. I met him at an event one time. I kept track of him on LinkedIn. Yeah, as stalker as it sounds like. I kept track of like his career, where he was going, what his job titles were, and I reached out to him and said, "Hey, I'm looking to hire someone." Which kind of was like the opposite of my story I just told. But I asked him like, "Hey, are you interested in a new opportunity?" And what I loved about Ben was he was a manager at a Manhattan Starbucks. And can you imagine, maybe some of you know that, like, can you imagine being a Manhattan Starbucks manager? Like how hellish and fast-paced and like stressful an environment that is? And Ben is just the coolest operator. He's so chill, he's so even keel, he's so good at taking on stress and like working through problems and thinking through things. So, whether you start, like you leave Eastern, you get a great internship, and then you go work as a pen tester, Like, cool, that's a really good career path. Congratulations, you made a lot more money than I did when I got out of here. But if you also think about it as like a long game, and you remember that your career is probably from like, 22 to 65, don't look away from being a software engineer for 5 years. Don't look away from being a sysadmin or network engineer or going to work as like an SRE or a DevOps engineer. There's a lot of value in being able to hire people. When I hire people, I tend to hire people that have lived experience, that understand the problem, that understands the context of the problem. It's very easy to break things. It's very easy to hack things. Some of that might not feel true today, but I assure you it is. It is very hard to elegantly architect things that scale the globe for companies. And if you understand a little bit about the latter, when you do the former, you will understand more about what you're trying to solve after you hack it. You're going to understand more about how to collaborate with the person you have to tell bad news to, that their baby's ugly, basically, that it's broken, and I'm sorry, but I was a software engineer, and I've got like 4 ideas that we can talk about and whiteboard out now together, and we'll figure out how to do this together, right? So I think a lot of it comes back to the opportunities for training. I don't just see it as like, and my whole team will hopefully tell you this, they'll talk to you, but like my thesis on training is not simply like the build your army of security professionals. It's that if your engineers trust you, they will come to you with questions, which is vastly more effective and efficient than if you have to find the vulnerability every single time. If they say, hey, Mark, I'm working on this new, like, I have lots of stories of real life of this happening, like, I have this new design. Here's what I'm doing, and here's what I'm scared about. If they come to you with that in like a package, you're like, oh yeah, these 4 things, you should go look at those and come back and let me know. Versus, I wrote 100,000 lines of code in the last like 4 years. We're about to ship this thing, find the bug. Like that's the difference, because the engineers are not, I think one of the, like it's amazing to me that this is possible, but like there are a lot of security professionals that think like engineers are like dumb or incompetent because they have a bug in their code, which is absolutely what happens if you've never been a software engineer. Like you're like, how could you possibly ship that easy? Very easily is the answer. It's very, very easy to ship bugs. We see Apple do it, we see Microsoft do it, we see Cisco do it, we see all the biggest corporations around the world constantly patch. What do you think those patches are? Maybe a feature enhancement once in a while, they'll probably make you, get that down the road for like a new OS release. But almost assuredly, it's entirely bugs. So like 90% of what you just got in that package for Patch Tuesday, bugs. Maybe not all security bugs, but a bug that's a security bug and a bug that's not a security bug, the only difference is the implication of outcome, right? Bugs happen, software engineers make mistakes, code is infallible, your processor makes mistakes. There are parts of your processor that will incorrectly compute things in certain contexts. There are different ways to manipulate systems that you think are foolproof, like, oh, it's in silicon, oh, it's in like this copper that has, there are 1,000 ways to break things, and it's actually very easy. It's very hard to understand how to fix things or how to like partner with people if you just simply do not understand anything about them. So there's a lot of like diversification of ideas and experiences and background. And I don't know if I'm good at my job, but if I am good at my job, it's probably because I did work in a help desk for 4 years, and then I was a sysadmin for 2 years, and I did 2 of my own startup companies, and I worked as a security professional consulting, and I got to see dozens of companies like in a couple of years. There's no way I could do any of what I'm doing today if I didn't have all that preceding experience and perspective. Because again, perspective is the hardest thing to get for like college, honestly. Like you learn how to learn at college, you learn fundamentals, you learn like general principles, but if you've not shipped a line of code at an actual company and seen a bug in the real world break things, how do you begin to even understand or empathize with your customer? It's a very tough problem to make up, I guess. Any other questions?
Take one more.
Yeah.
Well, okay.
You want to cut the